I'll kind of remind you where we were when we left off in terms of kind of the sequence of, or the logic of Kant's thought. I was looking into the idea of a goodwill, saying that the only thing that's inherently good, that is always good, and that is essentially good, is a goodwill. But what is a goodwill? How do we know that the will is good in any particular situation? And Kant says that a goodwill is always a will that is determined by a recognition of duty. To put it in more, I think, everyday terms, Kant thinks that morality is about doing the right thing, doing what you have to do, not doing what is advantageous for you, but doing what you recognize you must do, that you're called upon to do. And that's really, I think, what he means by duty. That is, there are times in life when doing the right thing can be very difficult and can be very costly, both for you and for others. But you know that you have to do the right thing. And in those situations, that's what it means to do your duty. It certainly doesn't mean duty to a human being in the sense that somebody has authority over you, like a cop or a teacher or a priest or somebody. It's not like that. It's what is duty, right? Duty is always something that points to something. Duty to what? Uh, Duty to something, and the answer for Kant is that your duty is not to a human being per se, of any sort, even if they're in a position of authority. Your duty is to the moral law. But what does that mean? And that's sort of where we are at the beginning of this reading, when he says, what sort of law can that be? The conception of which must determine the will, even without paying any regard to the effect expected from it, right? Because he says that the effects of an action, consequences of an action, are not really important when it comes to evaluating the morality. It's the intention, whether it's lawful, whether it's done out of a duty to the law. But what sort of duty, or what sort of law are we talking about? He says there remains nothing but the universal conformity of its actions to law in general, which alone is to serve the will as a principle. That is, I am never to act otherwise than so that I could also will that my maxim should become a universal law. So, what sort of law are we talking? Moral law? Well, it's not a particular content of moral law. It's not like the Ten Commandments. It's more of a formal thing. See if I can find empty space here. I know that whatever I do, my actions must be lawful. And here we're talking, with a very sort of vague general sense of lawful, not like lawful in the sense of legal, that narrow sense of legal, just that they should be allowed, they should be permitted, they should not transgress any law I know in my action. But what's the rule that I'm following? And he says, as he says there, I am never to act otherwise. That's not really helping. About right here. I am never to act otherwise than so that I could also will that my maxim should become a universal law. And that is what, I'm sorry, I keep going to this one. Off. Just rewriting a little bit because maxim just means rule of action. I should never act except when my rule of action could serve as a law for everyone to follow. That I should never do anything that I wouldn't be able to stand behind as an example for everyone else to follow. And when I do such things, and we all do such things sometimes, I know that I'm making an exception to that, and that basically what I'm doing is unethical. This is what we'll see is the first example of what Kant is calling a categorical imperative. And this is the first version of the categorical imperative. And oftentimes, I'm not, yeah, why not? It's the one having to do with universalizability. And that's a mouthful of a word, but basically, the idea of what I just said, I should never act except when my rule of action could serve as a law for everyone. Can I universalize my action morally? If I can, that is, if my rule of action should always serve as a law for everyone, first of all, I have to think about what is my rule of action. Say that I don't study for a test, and then I show up for the test, and I don't know any of the answers because I didn't study, so I cheat and look at the test of the student next to me. My rule of action would be, if you haven't studied for a test and you don't know the answers, it's okay to cheat to pass the test. Can that rule be universalized? Well, no, because then that would mean that it's always okay to cheat on a test, and then the whole idea of tests would break down. So that's an example of rule of action that can't be universalized. And if it can't be universalized, you know it's wrong. If it can be universalized, you know at least that it's not unethical. It may be ethically neutral, but it's not unethical. If I see a child in the street, walking amongst traffic, and I have to cross against the light, cross on a red light to go help them, I'm going to go do that. And then I ask myself, is it okay to disobey the red light law in order to help a child who's in danger? Of course it is. I could universalize that. Absolutely. So this is important, first categorical imperative. The idea that whatever I do, all my actions are the rule according to which I act, and all my actions should be universalizable. If it is universalizable, if I realize it can be generalized to be a universal law for everybody, then I know that it's okay to do it. If I don't think, if I realize it can't be universalized, then I know it's wrong to do. And this is sort of the first payoff in the sense of foundations that I was talking about in the introduction. That is that this first version of the categorical imperative gives you a principle, not only not for how to live your whole life, so much as how to evaluate the ethics of a particular situation. That is, it gives you a tool to use. I'm thinking of doing this. I'm thinking of doing that. Can my rule actually be universalized? It's actually a tool for sort of testing whether what you're thinking of doing actually passes muster as a possible ethical act.